conversation about the transhumanism movement continues. We discuss genetic manipulation and brain chips, the role of ethics, and we ponder the question, is Homo Sapiens on the verge of surrender? Stay tuned.
Will there be a point where cybergenetics becomes the standard?
We would refer you to our previous answer. Any intentional alteration of the fundamental design of the human blueprint that is manipulated or is accomplished outside of your already well-established evolutionary patterns is fundamentally, we would say, borrowing trouble. And although it may seem like a good idea at the time, you will eventually find that it is as if you have opened a box that contains far more problems than benefits. And again, we would argue against such a path, but your question was, will it become a thing of the future? And we can see how this cybergenetics could take on a life of its own and begin to infiltrate into your human evolutionary pathway, which will then distort your outcome here as a collective on this planet. So the short answer to your question would be yes, we see that coming as well.
So, brain-computer interface devices, or brain chips, are currently being developed for surgical implantation into the skull, with tiny wires extending into the brain to record and potentially stimulate neural activity, which will allow users to control external devices with their thoughts. So while this development may help improve the lives of those with paralysis or blindness, what are the repercussions of the inorganic materials into the body, which I know you discussed, but how do these alterations to the human body affect our connection to soul?
Energetically, these devices could cause a shift in focus in the mind, in the same way that the telephone went from a device where you were focused on hearing the voice on the other end to now there's words in your hand. This device being implanted in the brain would have a similar impact on the human mind. In other words, your point of focus is going to shrink to where the attention is on the operation of the device as opposed to the perception of the greater reality that one is moving through. So the practical impact of putting such a device in the brain would effectively serve to collapse your multidimensionality and turn you from a multidimensional being with the capacity to access limitless dimensions to a singular experience for you as far as your perception is concerned. Now, we would see this as a detriment and not a benefit.
What would you say the role of ethics plays in the transhumanism movement?
While we would say that there ought to be ethical applications within the framework of this movement, we would say that it is not likely that at this current time that it is primarily motivated by ethical considerations. It is more of a monetary goal here. If we can take a technology that is useful to people that need this in order to improve their daily living and convince a healthy person to implant this in them, in their body, in order to make them a quote unquote better human, there's a massive amount of monetary gain that could be achieved. And so we would say to you that at this time we do not feel that ethics plays much of a role in the movement, except that at this point it has not come to a place where the implantations are mandatory. In other words, at this time they would still be discretionary. A person could choose to be augmented or not. But if you follow this path, to its conclusion, one could see a time where at birth certain implants are done to the human at the time of birth, as opposed to waiting for that human to grow to a place where the soul could make its own decision. That would be the trajectory that would concern us the most. For all of this would have behind it a motivation of increased control over the mass of humanity. That particular goal does not serve your trajectory when speaking about the ascension of the planet and the people that are on it. So all of this that we are speaking about today causes us grave concern. For humanity is reaching a point where the actions, the choices that are being made, the actions that are being taken, could lead to ramifications or results that impact the rest of creation. And then you are not speaking of an isolated experience. So it remains to be seen what steps, if any, would be taken to remediate this growing concern.
So, if transhumanism is the way of the future, Are you able to say what will become of humans who choose not to pursue altercations or implantations in their bodies?
More likely than not, it will create a civilization separate from the primary one. It would be more of a state of outcasts or revolutionaries or purists, or call them whatever you will. But there would be both a physical and a philosophical separation between the two groups. The group with the augmentations would more likely than not be in the group that is in power and therefore holds the control. And those without the augmentations would be left to fend for themselves, to fight for their right to be the sovereign decision maker over the fate of their own vehicle. As we mentioned earlier, however, we can see a timeline, a potential timeline where certain augmentations are made at the time or very close to the time of birth, with or without the permission of the parents. It's like a mandatory process. This would be farther down the road than the separation between the augmented group and those that choose not to. For then those augmentations that would happen around the time of birth would totally be implemented as a form of control over. So it would not be a positive outcome for your species as a whole. And we are hoping something will change the trajectory of this development before this potential timeline is activated in a way that would prevent being able to change that trajectory in the future. The augmentation of some and the choosing of others to not receive that would create such a polarization on your planet that we can see how it could literally tear your world into pieces. So, again, we are concerned for much of what is happening on your planet now as far as your technology. It is probably going to be espoused someday that the advent of the technology, the advancement of the technology, brought on the beginning of the end of an entire cycle of civilization, of being on your planet. Should an event occur that then places your planet back into a time frame where these implementations are not possible due to the lack of a source of electricity or power or other simple means, then there would be an opportunity for salvation. If indeed what it's going to take is for humanity to be sent back into the Dark Ages, this may be a decision that does come to pass over time. It was not intended that you, as a species, advance to such a place as you have in the past, that you are capable of destroying both yourself and your world. And as in the past, this has not been allowed to happen, and therefore it is not likely that it will be allowed to happen in the future. Again, humanity is at a tipping point, and we stand and watch and wait to see what the outcome is going to be. For indeed, there is much hope riding on what is happening here at this time. And we wish only for the greatest of success for if, as a collective, you are able to overcome these current challenges and to reverse the path that you find yourselves on. There is a potential for a far greater creation and a richer experience for those of you that are incarnated in these human bodies than could be imagined for you at this time.
Thank you. You touched a little about this before, but I just want to confirm. So you don't foresee at any time that tech beings or robots will gain emotional intelligence that would lead to them becoming multidimensional or sentient beings, correct?
Artificial intelligence is just that. It is intelligence, but it is artificial. It is intelligence that is only as good as the input, whatever it is that is given by the creator of that intelligence, that forms its personality per se. And we would not discount the fact that the intelligence itself can teach itself how to learn organically and learn to perceive very much in the same way as the human brain and mind can work. So we are not going to discount that potential.
And there is not really is there such a possibility to transfer consciousness into a tech being or AI?
At this time, we would say that if such a transfer of consciousness were attempted, it would be imperfect at best, and so you're not going to create a perfect copy of that intelligence or that consciousness as you transfer it. And it would be the consciousness at the human level of experience. It wouldn't necessarily include the aspect that is the soul that animates the human form. So we would differentiate between those two levels of consciousness. The soul that animates the human form is what makes it human. And yet, one can create a consciousness that appears to be human and interact in a human way, but is not technically a soul. In other words, there is not the birth of a soul with the transference of the consciousness into a machine. Is there the potential for this to happen? Based on the current evolution of your technology, we would say at this time, we would say no. Will it ever get to a place where you are able to create souls at this level of being? We do not see that. Can a sentient being be also an ensouled being? We would differentiate between the soul that animates the form and the consciousness that is collected through human experience over the lifetime of a human. So that is how we would answer this quandary. We would say they are two different forms of consciousness or levels of consciousness, if you will.
Thank you. In closing, can you please share your thoughts on this quote from American biologist and naturalist Edward O. Wilson? Quote, "Homo sapiens, the first truly free species, is about to decommission natural selection, the force that made us. Soon, we must look deep within ourselves and decide what we wish to become." End quote.
As we have discussed this entire conversation, as a species, you are at that tipping point. You are at that decision point. What are you going to choose for yourself? Are you going to allow the natural evolution of your species unimpeded by too much human level intervention when it comes to your own evolution? Or are you going to succumb to the lure of feeling you are godlike in your level of creation, which is a virtual impossibility because your spirit animated form, you are an ensouled being? Not that you cannot tap into that level of expression and transcend the limitations of your own physical body, but you were not designed to create such a complex organism as your own human body is. For it is a perfect reflection of divinity itself. And as you humans choose to adjust the parameters of what it means to be human, you are also rewriting the divine design for this particular experiment. And so we would say that he is indeed correct. It is time for you to choose. Are you going to allow the wisdom of the Creator itself to hold sway? Or are you going to choose to hold the belief that you can manage the creation moving forward with your limited perspective better than the unlimited vision of creation itself? So yes, you are being called to choose at this time. And we, as we have said this whole day, would encourage you to choose wisely. This will not be an issue for too many of you that are alive on the planet at this time. But the events that take place over the next 50 to 100 years will definitely have an impact on how things unfold in the long term moving forward for the majority of the inhabitants of this planet.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your insight today. Is there anything more that you would like to share before we end?
As always, we enjoy the conversations. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak in this fashion, unimpeded in any way. And we look forward to further discussion of similar topics that may be of interest to all of you. You are humans. You are divinely and magnificently designed and created for a specific purpose. We do not understand why you would want to alter the design, but we also understand that learning comes in many forms. For now, we will thank you once more for this opportunity and say, be at peace.
Thank you.
If you gained an insight, found inspiration, or have a moment of reflection about this content, please consider giving us some love by going to buymeacoffee.com/evolvinghumans. You can and do make a difference.